I don't know if I should start with the way she looked at me that morning or the way she said my name, like she was trying it out, softer than usual. But maybe it's better if I begin with something ordinary. It was just a Saturday, too early for most people. I was at the coffee shop near campus, the one that always plays old music a little too loud. I liked it because nobody really knew me there, except the barista who remembered I always ordered black coffee, but never finished it. I was halfway through scrolling my phone, rereading a text draft I'd never send, when she walked in. My friend's mom. Not the kind of woman who blends into places. She didn't belong to the quiet chatter of college kids or the couples with their laptops spread across the tables. She walked in like she had already decided she wasn't here to wait for anyone's approval. A scarf wrapped loosely around her neck, hair pulled back. No effort to look younger. She didn't need to. I didn't think she'd notice me. But she did. Coffee before noon? I didn't take you for an early riser, she said, smiling like she'd caught me off guard. I tried to answer, but my throat went dry. I gestured at the empty chair across from me before I even thought about it. She hesitated, just a flicker of her eyes, maybe checking the room, maybe deciding something, and then she sat. I folded the edge of my napkin while she set her phone face down on the table. You always order the same thing? She asked. Yeah, I said. Black coffee. I never finish it, though. That made her laugh, low and quick. That's the saddest order I've ever heard. Her laugh stayed with me, even as silence stretched out between us. Not uncomfortable, just strange. Like we'd skipped the part where people warm up to each other and gone straight to something heavier. I watched her stir sugar into her cup. My eyes kept drifting to her hands. Neat nails, one ring missing where a tan line should have been. I looked away too quickly, back at my half-written message glowing on my phone. She noticed. Writing something? She asked. I shook my head. Just not sure what to say. She tilted her head. That's not the worst place to be. It was such a simple thing to say, but it felt like she'd seen straight through me. Like she knew the kind of quiet I carried around, pausing over words I never said out loud, typing and erasing, waiting for something that never came. I wanted to tell her that. Instead, I just nodded. The shop bell rang as someone left. Sunlight slipped across her face, catching the faint lines near her eyes. She didn't smooth them away like most people would. She just let me see them. I should get going, she said after a moment, gathering her scarf. Then she paused, looked at me a little longer than she should have. Her phone buzzed on the table, but she didn't pick it up. Instead, she leaned slightly forward and said, almost like a secret, "This stays between us, all right?" And then she stood, left her coffee half finished, and walked out into the morning. I sat there, the napkin torn in my hands, my coffee cold, her words looping in my head. Between us. I didn't know what she meant. Not yet. But I knew I wasn't going to forget it that I didn't see her again for a week. Not until I stopped by my friend's house to drop off some notes he'd missed in class. He wasn't home, of course, but she was. The door was half open, music playing faintly from somewhere inside. She called out before I even knocked. Come in, it's unlocked. I hesitated in the doorway, clutching the notebook, wondering if it felt too deliberate, me being there. But when she appeared from the kitchen, tying her hair back with one hand, it felt like the coffee shop all over again, like the air shifted just because she was in it. Notes for him? She asked, nodding at the papers. Yeah. He missed the lecture. She took them, scanned the first page like she might actually read it, then set them on the counter. You're a good friend, she said. I wasn't sure how to answer that, so I just smiled. She poured tea into 2 cups without asking if I wanted any. It wasn't a question. It was her way of deciding I should stay a little longer. We sat at the kitchen table, the steam curling between us. She had this habit of resting her chin in her hand when she listened, like she was bracing herself against the weight of whatever she might hear. You always come here when he's not around? She asked lightly. I shook my head. No. Just timing, I guess. Her eyes narrowed slightly, like she didn't quite believe me. Or maybe she did, but she knew what went unsaid. There was a silence after that. Not the kind you rushed to fill, but the kind that made you aware of every sound. The clock ticking, the clink of her spoon against the cup. Then she surprised me. I used to sit right here, years ago, waiting for the kettle to boil. My husband hated when I made too much noise, said it was distracting. Her voice trailed, and she gave a small shrug, as if brushing away a memory she didn't mean to share. I wanted to ask what it was like, living with someone who called you distracting, but I didn't. I just held the cup, letting the warmth seep into my hands. Instead, I said, I like the noise. That made her glance at me, sharp and searching, before she looked away again. The conversation drifted into smaller things, books she'd been reading, classes I was struggling through. She asked questions no one else bothered with, like whether I still wrote in that notebook I used to carry in high school, the one I thought no one noticed. It unsettled me, how much she remembered. I found myself watching the way her fingers curled around the teacup, how she traced the rim absent-mindedly while listening. My mind kept jumping ahead, filling in things that weren't happening, her hand brushing mine, her leaning closer. I shook the thoughts away, ashamed of them, but they kept circling back. "You're quiet today?" she said suddenly. "Just tired," I lied. She didn't push, just nodded, like she'd heard the truth under it anyway. At some point, she reached over to move the notes farther from the tea, so they wouldn't get stained. Her hand lingered a second too long, her sleeve brushing against mine. Such a small thing, but it sent something through me I didn't know how to name. She noticed. I could tell in the way her lips parted slightly, the way she pulled her hand back slower than she needed to. The air between us shifted, not with anything spoken, but with everything held back. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door. I expected a quick goodbye. Instead, she gave me the faintest smile, touched her fingers to my sleeve, almost like straightening it, though it didn't need fixing. It was nothing, a meaningless gesture, but it stayed with me all the way home, heavier than any words could have been. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. It happened on a Tuesday. I wasn't supposed to be there. I'd only stopped by to grab the notes I'd left the week before, but she opened the door herself, hair loose this time, no scarf, no practice smile. "You again," she said softly. Not annoyed. Something else. I held up my excuse. "Forgot these." She let me in, but the air inside felt different. Quieter, like the house was listening. We ended up in the living room, papers spread across the coffee table. She leaned closer than she needed to, pointing at something she'd noticed in the margins. My pen strokes, messy, hurried. "You always write like you're in a rush," she said. "I usually am," I answered. Her hand hovered above the page, not touching, just there, close enough that I felt it anyway. The silence stretched. My eyes flicked to her lips before I caught myself. She noticed. I could tell. She sat back suddenly, smoothing her hair like she'd said too much without speaking. "Your friend will be home soon," she murmured. The reminder hit like cold water. The unspoken rule we were circling around. The boundary neither of us named. I nodded, staring down at the notes, trying to steady my breathing. That's when the front door rattled, just the sound of wind against it. Nothing more, but it made her jump slightly. She laughed under her breath, but her hand went to her chest. "You thought it was him," I said quietly. She didn't answer, just looked at me, a flash of something raw in her eyes. Guilt? Fear? Longing? Maybe all of it tangled together. I wanted to say something, anything to cut through it. Instead, I found myself picking at the seam of the couch cushion, wishing I could rewind 5 minutes. Or maybe fast forward past whatever this was becoming. She reached for her cup of tea, though it was already cold, held it just to have something in her hands. "This shouldn't, it's complicated." Her voice trailed off. She didn't finish the sentence. Neither of us moved. The clock ticked too loud. Somewhere outside, a car door slammed. And then she leaned forward again. Not much, just enough that I could smell her perfume, faint and warm, like something familiar I couldn't name. My chest tightened. If I'd shifted an inch, maybe less, we would have crossed it. But I didn't, and she didn't. We just sat there, caught in a silence that felt louder than words. When I finally stood, she didn't stop me. But as I reached for the door, she said my name. Soft, almost like she wanted to pull me back. I turned. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Shook her head. "Nothing," she whispered. And I left, the echo of that almost confession following me down the street. It was late afternoon when it happened. Not planned. I'd been walking home from class, earbuds in, head down, when I saw her sitting on the park bench across from the grocery store. She wasn't dressed like someone out for errands. No cart, no bag. Just sitting there, arms crossed lightly, like she'd been waiting but didn't know for what. Or who. I almost walked past. But she lifted her eyes and found me, and that was it. "Hey," she said. I sat down before thinking, leaving just enough space between us for air but not enough for comfort. She glanced at the notebook in my hand. "Always carrying that thing." I shrugged. "Habit." For a while we just watched the traffic. A bus hissed as it pulled to the curb. A kid dropped his ice cream, started crying. Small, forgettable things, except they weren't. Not when she was next to me. "You've been avoiding the house," she said finally. I froze. "I know. Just busy." Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Busy, right." I looked at her then, really looked. The way the light caught her hair, the faint lines around her mouth deeper than the last time I noticed. She didn't look like someone who needed my company. But she also didn't look like someone who wanted to sit alone on a bench, pretending she was just passing time. I heard myself ask, "Are you okay?" She let out a breath that sounded too heavy for the question. "Some days I don't know. Divorce papers come through. The house feels too big. My son barely looks at me." And then, she stopped, pressed her lips together. "And then?" I asked. Her fingers tightened around her sleeve. She shook her head. "Never mind." But the words had already hung there, waiting. I thought about the coffee shop, the kitchen, the way her hand had brushed mine. All the small things we both pretended didn't matter. "I think about it too," I said quietly. She turned, startled. "Think about what?" "Us." Sitting in silence. The pauses. My voice cracked a little, so I looked down, fiddling with the spiral of my notebook. "I don't know what any of it means, but it doesn't feel like nothing." Her breath caught. Just faintly, but I heard it. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, finally, she spoke, almost whispering. "You're 20. You're his friend. Do you have any idea how wrong this is?" "Yeah," I said. "Every idea." Her eyes softened, but not in relief. In something closer to defeat. "You don't make it easy," she said. I swallowed. "Neither do you." That made her laugh, quiet, broken at the edges. She leaned back against the bench, eyes closing for a second. "I wake up some mornings," she said, "and I hate myself for even noticing you. Then I see you again, and," she trailed off. "And," her eyes opened. She turned toward me, so close now that I could see the tiny scar at her hairline, the faint trace of lipstick on her teeth. And I forget what I'm supposed to do with all that guilt. We just sat there. Too close, too quiet. I could feel her pulse in the air between us. My hand twitched, wanting to reach for hers. I didn't. Instead, I asked, "So what happens now?" Her gaze held mine for a beat too long. Then another. She didn't answer. For a while, nothing changed. That bench moment lived in my head, looping like a song I couldn't turn off, but daily life kept moving. Classes, errands, the same coffee shop. Except, she wasn't there. I try not to notice at first. People get busy. She had her own life. But then my friend started talking about her in passing, little things he normally wouldn't bother sharing. "She's been weird lately," he said once, flipping through my notes. "Out of the house more. New people calling. You know how she gets." I didn't ask what he meant. Didn't want to. Still, I caught myself waiting. For a text that never came. For a chance encounter that didn't happen. The silence was louder than anything she could have said. When I finally saw her again, it wasn't planned. I was walking past the grocery store at dusk, the sky dim and gray, and she was standing in the parking lot, loading bags into her car. I almost waved. Almost. But then I noticed she wasn't alone. A man stood beside her, maybe late 40s, maybe older. He lifted one of the heavier bags into the trunk. She laughed at something he said, her hand brushing his arm in a way that looked too natural. I froze across the lot, hidden enough she didn't see me. That laugh, it wasn't the same as the one she gave me. Or maybe it was, and I just didn't want to believe it. I walked away before she could turn. That night, I opened my phone a dozen times. Typed out words I didn't have the right to send. "Did you forget the bench? Did you forget me?" Then erased them every single time. Days passed. She didn't reach out. I stopped going by the house, even when my friend asked. Claimed I was busy, that the semester was killing me. Truth was, I didn't trust myself not to look for her every time I stepped through that door. And then, like some cruel joke, she found me first. I was at the coffee shop again, hunched over my laptop, pretending to read. She walked in, no man this time, just her. She spotted me immediately, hesitated, then came over. "Hey," she said. I looked up, tried to act casual. "Hey." She slid into the chair across from me, like no time had passed. But something was different. She carried herself differently. Lighter maybe, or maybe just more closed. "I haven't seen you around," she said. I shrugged. "Been busy." Her eyes lingered on me, like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Instead, she stirred sugar into her coffee, though she hadn't ordered any. "Just a habit, maybe." "I've been sorting things out," she finally said. The words felt rehearsed, like a line she'd practiced in front of a mirror. I didn't ask what she meant. Didn't ask about the man, or the way she laughed with him. She didn't offer. We sat in that strange half-space where everything mattered but nothing could be named. After a while, she reached for her phone, glanced at the screen, and sighed. "I should go." I nodded. She stood, paused, and gave me the faintest smile. Not the kind from the kitchen table or the park bench. A different one, careful, polite. "This stays between us," she said again. But this time it sounded less like a secret and more like a goodbye. I didn't stop her. When she left, the chair stayed empty in front of me, and I stared at it longer than I should have. I typed her name into my phone, let the words spill out. I missed that day on the bench. But I never pressed send that I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence that IT was late. Too late to be knocking on someone's door. But I found myself standing on her porch anyway, hand hovering, second-guessing every decision that led me there. The lights were on inside. I could hear the faint hum of the dishwasher, the clink of a glass being set down. Normal sounds. Domestic. Ordinary. I almost turned away. Then the door opened. She looked surprised, but not angry. Just tired. Like she'd been carrying something heavy all day. "Hi," I said, voice barely holding. "Hi," she answered. We stood there for a beat too long, the air thick with everything unspoken. Then she stepped back, letting me in. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon soap. She'd been cleaning, or pretending to. A dish towel sat crumpled on the counter. She leaned against it, arms crossed. Not defensive, more like bracing herself. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "I know." Silence again. The clock over the stove ticked, louder than it should. Finally, I set my notebook down on the counter, fingers tapping against the cover. "I keep trying not to think about it. About you. But it doesn't work." Her eyes flickered, the kind of look you give when someone says the thing you've been trying not to admit. "I saw you," I added, before I could stop myself. "With him. At the store." Her jaw tightened. "That's complicated." I nodded. "Everything is." She sighed, pressing her palms flat against the counter as if grounding herself. "He's nothing. Just someone who makes the house less quiet for a while." The words stung, but not the way I expected. It wasn't jealousy. It was the reminder that I was just another way to fill silence. "I don't want to be temporary," I said, softer than I meant to. Her head dropped. A small laugh, bitter at the edges. "You think I do?" I didn't answer. She turned then, facing me fully. "Do you understand what this could do to you? To me? To my son?" I swallowed. "Yeah, I understand. And you're still here?" I met her eyes. "I'm still here." Something shifted in her then. Not relief, not joy. Something quieter. Like surrender. She walked past me to the sink, filled a glass with water, then set it down untouched. Her hands trembled slightly as she wiped them on the towel. "I've been so careful," she whispered. "My whole life. Careful with people, with words, with what I let myself want. And then you sit at a coffee shop with your sad little black coffee and make me forget how to be careful." Her voice cracked, and she pressed a hand to her mouth like she wished she could take it back. I moved closer, slow, leaving space for her to stop me. She didn't. I reached out, not for her hand, not for anything bold. Just the edge of the dish towel. Our fingers brushed. Stayed there. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't anything cinematic. Just skin against skin, both of us holding still like the smallest movement would undo it. Her eyes met mine, wet at the corners but steady. "This can't," she started, then stopped. "I know," I said. We stayed like that, caught between yes and no, want and restraint, until finally she let out a shaky breath. "Okay," she whispered. And somehow, that was enough. Time didn't stop for us. It just kept moving, the way it always does. Classes ended, seasons shifted, routines rearranged themselves. And yet, little by little, she was still there. Not in every moment, not in dramatic ways. Just there. It started with tea again, one late morning when I knocked, ostensibly to return a borrowed book, and she didn't send me away. We sat at the kitchen table like nothing had broken. Her scarf draped over the chair, my notebook between us. The kettle whistled too long before either of us moved. After that, it was easier. Walks that looked casual from the outside. Conversations that felt ordinary, except for the weight they carried. She never said, "I love you." I never asked her to. But the pauses between us stopped feeling dangerous. They started feeling like space we both trusted. On weekends, when my friend was out, I'd sometimes find her on that same park bench, the one where she'd once admitted her guilt, her fear. This time, though, she didn't look away when I sat down. She handed me half her sandwich, as if we'd been doing it for years. "Still writing in that notebook?" she asked once. "Still drinking too much tea?" I answered. We both smiled, no one needing to admit what those questions really meant. It wasn't a straight line. Some days she pulled back, retreating into herself, into old habits of being careful. Some days I disappeared into coursework or excuses. But every time, we found our way back, not with declarations, but with the simplest things. A text that only said coffee at 8:47 a.m. A folded napkin left by my notebook. A glance that held too long but didn't break. Life didn't turn into some perfect movie reel. My friend never found out, or maybe he just never asked the right questions. She still carried her divorce like a scar, and I still stumbled through my 20s like I had no idea what I was doing. But somehow, in the middle of all that, we carved out something steady. One night, after months of this unspoken rhythm, I found myself back in her kitchen again. Same lemon soap smell, same clock ticking over the stove. She poured tea, slid a cup toward me without asking. "You still don't finish your coffee," she teased. I grinned. "You still make too much noise with the kettle." She laughed, low and warm, and leaned back in her chair. And for the first time, the guilt wasn't there in her eyes. Just ease. We didn't need to name it. What we had wasn't built on titles or labels. It was built on everything that had gone unsaid and still managed to matter. When I left that night, she walked me to the door, like always. Except this time, she didn't say "this stays between us." She just said, "See you tomorrow." And that was enough. Even now, I don't remember the exact date, or the weather, or the clothes either of us wore. What I remember is the way the silence finally stopped feeling heavy. I remember that it was ours, and I'll never forget it.